Alrighty. Good morning, everybody. All right, I want to welcome you all to our Hepatitis Day event, and a special warm welcome to all of the Arbutus employees who are here. We have close to 30 additional Arbutus employees online, so welcome to everybody from all across the US and Canada. Welcome as well to our friends from the Hepatitis B Foundation. Very, very happy that you can join us for this special day. And I was thinking on the drive in this morning that, you know, most times when I drive in, I'm thinking about a work issue. You know, it's, I don't know, some investor meeting that Dave and I have got, or some curious chemistry point that Mike Sophia wants to debate. Or it's approving, you know, new staff requests from Cheryl. And, you know, every morning when I drive in, there's some nitty gritty thing that's going on, which is what we're all involved with in our company on a daily basis. But it's days like today where actually you go, let's just kind of like stop, lift our heads up and step back from the spreadsheets, the analyst presentations, the chem lab, the bio lab, whatever it is, the BD discussions. Let's step back and just take stock of what it is that we're actually doing, and just think about our mission at Arbutus to find a cure for hepatitis B. We'll hear from Hepatitis B Foundation about their mission, and then also hear from some people who are living with hepatitis B on what this means to them. So I really hope that we can have a good discussion this morning. Let's listen up, forget all those daily grind activities, and focus on that big picture of what we can do, you know, to make, you know, human health a whole lot better for a ton of people. So my job is just to welcome everybody this morning. I'm now going to hand over to our colleagues from Hepatitis B Foundation, and enjoy the morning.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. The last time we were here was it 2019? It was pre-COVID, so I don't remember, honestly, but it's a little bit deja vu-ish, except for we've all grown so much. So my name is Sherry Cohen. I'm president of the Hepatitis B Foundation. We are just up the block, about 10 minutes away. And our mission is to find a cure for hepatitis B, but also to raise the voices and represent the 300 million people around the world who have hepatitis B. And so the Hepatitis B Foundation team is here. Please feel free to ask questions later. We can tell you all about our programs, but we run public health, education, outreach, awareness, policy, and advocacy programs. And a lot of what we do is focusing on making sure that people who have hepatitis B are represented and are at the table. And that's one of the reasons we started the Just B Storytelling program, which Joan Block and I started actually with Mike Sophia. It was the first where we first said, you know, where are the voices? It's so hard. No one with hepatitis B is willing to come out. And Joan and I, for Joan Block, who was the previous executive director, we had tried for about 10 years. We couldn't get 2 or 3 people to talk about their hepatitis B. And then something changed in 2015. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was us constantly throwing things out there and improving awareness, but something changed. And all of a sudden, we put out this call for storytellers, and Arbutus was actually the first, you provided the seed funding to start the Just B Storytelling program. And now 6 years later, we have 45 storytellers who work with us diligently throughout the US and Canada. We have at least a few dozen more international storytellers. We have 40 videos. They've been viewed over 3 million times in, I think, 12 or 13 languages. I think we're making a huge difference. So this morning I was on the WHO webinar, and they had storytellers talking from globally from Hep B and Hep C. And of course, the hepatitis B storytellers are always from the Hep B Foundation, which makes me feel very gratified. But what I love is that other people are now doing it. So we're not the only people coming at the table, and people around the world are now talking about hepatitis B and what they're currently experiencing, what it means to live with hepatitis B, and what they want for the future in terms of quality of life, what they're facing with discrimination, what current treatment means for them, and what they want for the future, for future treatment and functional cure. And these kinds of experiences and exchanges between the people working in Hep B and people living with Hep B are critical. So we're thrilled to be here. Thank you very much for hosting, and everyone who is online watching, we hope you enjoy. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Ray Aracho, who actually directs the Just Be Storytelling program to get our program going.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ray Aracho, Program Director for Advocacy Engagement at the Hepatitis B Foundation. And I'm just going to do a quick introduction because really we're all here to hear from Jason, David, and Wendy. They're three of, as Sherry mentioned, 45 of our growing patient advocacy and storyteller community. When we launched the campaign, we weren't exactly sure, how many people we could recruit, but it's really the more videos we put out, the more people are willing to step up to. So we invited Jason, he came down from New York, David's here from Michigan, Wendy came from California. They've all participated in our Just Be Storytelling workshop at different times from different cohorts. But one of the things that comes out of that workshop is a short 3-minute video after meeting other people living with hepatitis B and kind of learning about ways to effectively share your story and going through a digital storytelling process with our partner Story Center. They leave the weekend with this awesome video that kind of summarizes their experiences. So the way the panel is going to work is that we're going to show each of their videos before the storyteller comes up to share more about their journey and maybe the daily challenges or day-to-day sort of impacts that hepatitis B has had on their life. And just kind of share what it's like to be living with chronic hepatitis B. And then we'll move into a more open, hopefully you guys have questions or comments, and we want you guys to interact and ask whatever you would like to ask. And so I'll help moderate that. If there are questions that also come in from the Zoom or from Facebook, I'll help bring those questions to the storytellers. But we wanted to thank you again for taking the time to listen to these stories. And I will go ahead and I think hand it off to start with David's video, and then I'll invite him up to speak.
I was adopted out of South Korea when I was 5 months old. I remember my parents taking me to the clinic when I was 13 and hearing about this thing called hepatitis B. I was in middle school, thinking about dating, doing sports, not about having a chronic illness. The doctor said, "You can live a long, healthy life," but nobody helped me talk about the things that mattered to me. It built up, and during freshman year in high school, I tried to stop all of the questions by swallowing a bunch of Tylenol pills. After that, I started therapy, but it focused on my suicide attempt and not on hepatitis B. In my early 20s, I found opioids. They were an escape from feeling. The silver lining was that my loved ones noticed, and we started talking about it, which led me to talk about Hep B for the first time. And things started to change. I still alternated between not caring, being worried, and wanting to ignore it. I didn't go to the doctor as often as I should have. Then, in November of last year, I found out my liver wasn't doing so hot. The doctor suggested a liver biopsy. I went home afterwards to have dinner with my parents. The spinach from their garden was crisp. The smell of garlic filled the house. We laughed and enjoyed each other's company. I thought, I like this moment. I want more of them. So I scheduled the biopsy. It's been a wild ride. I'm on medication now. Most days are still tough, but my liver is healthy. The struggles and successes They're all linked together. I feel more comfortable in my own skin. I'm learning from my past. And I'm living with hepatitis B. Just to be honest.
I actually haven't watched that video since I made it. So it's bringing up a lot of feelings for me right now, but most of them good. Just want to quickly say that I'm just so honored to be here at Arbutus and just surrounded by people that honestly I consider heroes. As a hepatitis B patient, there's a lot of times where we sort of think of our disease in terms of going to the hospital, checking up with your doctor, but we tend to forget sometimes, at least myself, that there are so many people like all of you and all the wonderful staff of the HBF that are just constantly working towards improving the lives of people that are afflicted with this disease. Just gonna give a quick introduction. My name is David Urich. I'm 33 years old and I'm coming from Ann Arbor, Michigan. A quick little personal professional background on myself. I found out I had hepatitis B at the age of 13. From everything I know, I've had it since birth. I was adopted out of South Korea at 5 months old, and for the most part, my childhood was very normal. It wasn't until I reached my teenage years that things started to get a little bit more difficult for me. Around the time of that suicide attempt that was mentioned in the video, I had sort of given up completely on life and all the wonderful things that it can bring us. I was able to finish school, thankfully, and keep up some relationships with people in my life, but a lot of my experience with hepatitis B as a younger person was very traumatic and full of suffering. As far as career goes, I sort of have bounced around different jobs throughout my life. Worked in kitchens for most of my teenage years and 20s. I've worked as a manager at UPS, worked in a book binding company. So I've kind of just been in any type of industry you can imagine. But what I'm doing right now is working as a direct patient care manager for an individual that has some developmental disabilities. It's been a job I've been doing for about 3 years now, and it's probably one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done because it seems like my job is centered around improving someone's life and being compassionate towards them while doing it. And those two tenets right there are something that I wish I had told myself more when I was younger, because that diagnosis was just such a hard moment for me at that age that I think I needed a little bit of extra help, but I just didn't know how to ask for it. And I didn't think that the resources were available to me. So at the clinic that day, I was told about the disease. It sort of felt like an out-of-body experience, because you hear as a patient about all these things that you should be paying attention to maintain your health, things that the doctor will talk to you about that could be potentially in your future, such as liver damage or cirrhosis, liver transplants. I know the likelihood of these things is low when us as patients are monitored from an early age, but to me at that time, it felt like a death sentence. So my teenage years after that were just spent internally asking myself all these questions that I should have gone to a hepatologist with. But unfortunately, I just didn't have the strength to do it at the time. So a lot of my life has been essentially hiding a huge part of who I am as a person, and kind of just pushing that to a corner that kind of just burst when I turned 18, because I realized that I could no longer keep within all the struggles I was having with this disease, and sort of understanding that after I had talked to the first person who I'd ever told, who was my brother, that kind of just a feeling of it's okay to talk about this started to fill my head. And the years following that, you know, they were up and down. I had a lot of times where I didn't see doctors for years, and hepatitis B can be such a invisible disease for a lot of us, because essentially it's a wait and see type deal, where you're essentially waiting for your doctor to tell you what the next steps are. For me, I thought those next steps were a lot worse than they were. But after a decade in my 20s full of drug abuse to try to self-medicate all the terrible feelings I was having, kind of just being lost with this this illness, and kind of never feeling like I had my health under control. I would go to the doctor sometimes, but I would feel like I didn't accomplish anything when I left, and I didn't feel like I was taking care of my health whatsoever. And it wasn't until my late 20s, the summer of 2018, to where I had a regular liver function panel test done. And just as a side note, I've been HBeAg positive for the majority of my life, with a very, very high viral load. So that has also been sort of a fear of mine that's perpetuated throughout my life. I remember feeling as a teenager afraid to even go in public sometimes, or do the things that I love to do, like the rollerblading you saw in that video. A lot of times you'll fall, you'll start bleeding. And I remember times like that were just complete nightmares for me, because I wasn't equipped with the knowledge that I needed to, you know, to be confident in that everything would be okay if I kept it safe. But anyways, so going back on treatment, that summer, my doctor called me about 2 weeks after I gotten those liver function tests done. And she told me that the past year, my ALT and AST had been fluctuating, and my doctors had talked for a few weeks and decided that a liver biopsy would be my best option. So I went home and I weighed that for a few days. I talked to my parents and had conversations with myself, because the possibility of lifelong medication was talked about as a possible follow-up to the biopsy. So, you know, knowing what I know now, I kind of shake my head at how scared I was, but that was a really hard moment for me. Kind of just like turning a switch on and deciding to kind of take my hepatitis B seriously. So I went back to the doctor and we had the biopsy done. Thankfully, I had no liver scarring, and everything was a-okay in that regard. But my hepatologist still suggested to start treatment as a daily medication. Probably about 3 weeks after that medication prescription was written, I was still feeling lost, just completely, you know, like I was kind of just being guided along a path that had already been predetermined for me. I didn't feel like I had any autonomy in my health. But finally, what I did do was I started to sort of try to see what hepatitis B is like for other people around the world, because it's been such an insulated part of my life for the first half of it, that at times I forgot that, you know, I'm one of over 300 million people. It's not a simple fact of just I'm struggling with this by myself. So I started to search around the internet and Facebook especially, and I was suggested some videos from the Hepatitis B Foundation, who I had never heard of. But this thumbnail of this woman's video, I don't forget what her name was, but it just drew me to it, and I just clicked play, and 3 minutes later I found myself completely crying out my eyes out, and I couldn't understand why, but I felt this huge connection to a large group of people that I've never met before. but instantly just felt this camaraderie with them. Pretty soon after watching that video and kind of interacting with their page, someone from that HBF reached out to me and just invited me out to do the same thing as the woman did, whose video I watched and was so moved by. So that was essentially just an aha moment for me, and I think it maybe took me less than 10 seconds to say yes. And within a couple weeks, I was getting ready to go out to Berkeley, California, to do a Just Be storytelling workshop with Rhea and Catherine and Shari and so many other wonderful people I've met since that time. And I have to say, it was one of the most life-altering moments for me. It completely changed the trajectory of how I approach life and how I live it. Simply, I didn't know that just simply sharing my story could impact someone, but every time I have that thought running through my head, I remind myself that it was another person's video that led me into the world of patient advocacy. And that gift is something that I'd like to just keep trying to provide other patients that might not have the strength or might not have found their voice yet, because I think it's just a tragedy when someone has to suffer in silence. And with the amazing community that we have based around HBV, it's a shame that anyone feels alone, because there's just so much love I felt through fellow patients and through advocates and through the community that it's just quite something to behold. I'm, not one for cliches, but it feels like a family. And it's taken me to different places where I couldn't have imagined I'd be speaking. I was in Geneva last month speaking at the World Hepatitis Summit for the World Health Organization, and I met so many wonderful people over there too. And it's just a constant reminder that, this might be a silent disease, but it's not. The people that are fighting against it are not silent. They're very loud and they care so much. And just, I don't know, seeing this side of it, the research side, and all the work that you all do is just very, very moving to me, because you're not the type of people I get to thank in person very often. And it's just such a surreal experience being able to be here and share my story with you guys. And I don't know, I feel a sense of gratitude to all of you.
I remember all the questions swimming around in my head. Why me? Why now? In 2011, I was living in New York City. One day, from a routine medical examination, I discovered the devastating news. I have hepatitis B. At the time, my life was unbalanced due to misgivings with addiction, leaving me lost, spiritually bankrupt, confused, all the while living with AIDS. I relocated back to my native Kansas after the untimely passing of my mother, which catapulted my life into recovery. Nearby Kansas City, which is flooded with hepatologists who only specialize in Hep C. That's not what I have. The doctor that was treating me had very little experience with hepatitis B, HIV co-infections. She put me on a higher dose of medication, which led me to develop kidney disease. She told me there was nothing she could do for me. When I lived in New York City, I learned to be proactive. So I started signing up with every research study I could find, as far away as Oklahoma and Texas. I fell into a deep depression and attempted suicide because I thought there was no hope. My husband stood by my side. Without him, I doubt I would have made it through those tough times. Finally, I found a hepatologist 290 miles away in St. Louis. He was flabbergasted at the measures used to treat my Hep B. He let me know right there everything was going to be all right. New medicines are coming down the pipeline in a few years. He enrolled me into his cohort study to monitor what makes Hep B better or worse. He made me feel like I mattered. So today I educate high school students about hepatitis B as well as HIV. Let me tell you something, Hep B. I have you. You don't have me. Just be aware.
Is it on? Okay, there we go. My name is Jason Crum Escalera. I am a HIV hepatitis B patient advocate. I think I was one of the first groups of Just Be Storytellers in 2015, I think it was, or 16. 16, okay. I never get the date right. I can identify with a lot of the stories as David has spoke about. I too have suffered with addiction because of my status, hepatitis B status, not knowing, not having a clue as to what's going on. And mind you, I am living with HIV as well. And so not knowing how to really live with that either anymore. You know, life it just became unmanageable. And so I couldn't find, I had moved back home, and it just comes to show you the difference between metropolitan cities and rural America, how the difference in healthcare, the difference of how people treat you. The stigma is much more heavier, it's much more thicker in rural America. And not just hepatitis B, but really anything. Unfortunately, I had to endure some medical stigma with my hepatologist, because back in that area, I'm sure there was a lot of people living with hepatitis B, but they wasn't known. They had a lot of hepatitis C, and that's what she specialized in. And then I'm dealing with a co-infection with HIV. And so she gave me too much medication when nothing else was working. So I wind up traveling 200 and I believe 90 miles away to St. Louis to get treatment. And it wasn't even treatment, it was a cohort study to see what makes it better, what makes it worse, until something else came down the pipeline. In the meantime, he sent me next door to, I think his name was Dr. Melvin Lister, was the, I couldn't remember his name for years, now I just remember it. Melvin Lister, he was the investigator for hepatitis B. And so he referred me to his colleague, and Melvin Lister was at Washington University, St. Louis. And he sent me to his colleague next door at Barnes Jewish, because the two were right next to each other, at Barnes Jewish Medical Center. And isn't that weird? I always knew his name. Now I forget his name. I remember Dr. Lister. Okay. But anyway, I would go there every month, and they would draw my blood, and I would participate in the research. So they ask me questions, how am I feeling, and everything. And then I got hooked up with the Hepatitis B Foundation, And that was where life for me had changed completely. I did this storytelling campaign, and I actually thought it was going to be, big lights, camera, action. I'm going to California, and I'm thinking about the white little globes, and you go to have your little trailer, the makeup room, and all this stuff. It was a makeup room. It really was. It was a makeup room of reality, where, unbeknownst to me, I'm stripping down. I'm not in control anymore. I'm stripping down the layers, because I only had 3 days to do it. And I'm stripping down the layers in order to tell my story with efficiency, to tell my story with impact, to tell my story where other people can identify and see the passion, hear the passion and feel it, and realize that it's okay to talk about it. And the biggest selling point of my advocacy is moments like this, the intimate moments like this, in this room where you have people who want to know, people who want you to share it with them, the knowledge. And the knowledge that people who are on the waves, Facebook, are getting. The knowledge that people probably question what it's like to live with hepatitis B. Well, to be honest with you, it's no different than not living with it. It's about how you approach it mentally. And unfortunately, there are thousands and millions and millions and millions of people out there who did not get the chance to do what you and I did. They didn't get a chance to wake up one morning to tell their story, but we can't forget them. We can't forget who they are. And so that's the essence of why I love doing what I do, to represent them, myself, and those who can't speak at all, because of stigmas. Stigma's a really bad thing, but we can knock stigma down. We can show stigma something, one or two, and by being bold, by being accurate with information, by, sharing our hopes and our strengths, not just the surface stuff, but the stuff that makes people want to listen, that captivates their attention, like, I understand, I get that, I went through something like that, and yes, sometimes I go and I look at my video just to check in, to kind of get a reality check of, okay, I need to do something, I need to bring it back. So I go look at my video and I get a recap of everything I went through to get to that point of change. And I'm still changing, I have other medical conditions that I have to live with that are not in relation to HIV or hepatitis B, but I'm still changing, and change is okay. It's when you are able to, you get the opportunity to come out and experience moments like this. This is my purpose-driven life, is to help people help me.
The dawning sun spreads a golden glow out and above the horizon. The lighting accents the surface of the waves, drawing attention to the water's ebb and flow. I look out. What is it like to live with hepatitis B? In college, I was getting ready to study abroad in China. When I went in to get a vaccine for Hep B, I tested positive for the virus. I graduated, but I did not study abroad. For a whole decade, I put Hep B out of sight and out of mind. I was a busy, career-driven supermom, juggling family, home, and work in a fast-paced, always-on industry. In my 30s, the stress became too much. What knocked on my door was the virus, and I was put on medication. I learned to live with the illness. I became a health seeker, studying nutrition and fitness, practicing yoga and meditation. I learned to earn a living, yet let go of a workaholic career. And I had to redefine what is happiness and success. To me, health is wealth. A few years ago, a loved one passed away from liver cancer, and I might have liver damage. That hit me hard. I'm already doing everything I can, but it's still not enough. Regrets for the past, worries and anxiety for the future. How can I be okay? No one would choose to have hepatitis B, but since I do, how can I respond most fully to what is here? What if I were to connect to the beauty of living and to appreciate what is here now? What if I were to experience the bloom of this moment and the next moment? It's not about the quantity of years, but really about the quality of living. I'm less afraid of dying and a lot more afraid of not having lived. Just be mindful.
Hi, everyone. Awesome. Okay. So I'm one of the new storytellers. So this whole experience is also first time for me. Okay. To heal a world in need. I saw this on the opioids website. By the numbers, almost 1 million people die of hepatitis B every year. 300 million people are living with hepatitis worldwide today. About 2.4 million in the US alone. The world needs you. I need you. My name is Wendy Lowe, and I live in the San Francisco, California Bay Area. I've been a resident there for about 40 plus years. I was originally born in mainland China, and I work in the high-tech industry in Silicon Valley in various roles. Today, we got to see the lab and all the work that many of you do. And in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, oh, how do they store this data? So, yeah. As I mentioned, in addition to being a storyteller, I'm also a member of the new global HBV Community Advisory Board, and as part of the Hep B Foundation. And its aim is actually to integrate a patient's voice into the drug development and the clinical research. So you might get to see me again. Hopefully we do. The other thing that I do is I'm involved with the San Francisco Hep B Free organization, which is local to San Francisco, to reach out to people and provide public health around Hep B. My intention to share my story is to inform you with two key takeaways. One, why we need a cure. Because hepatitis can't wait. And two, you are my hero to heal a world in need. I have been diagnosed with hepatitis B for 28 years. And I think my story is best told organized in two chapters. Chapter 1 is how I got diagnosed in the monitoring phase. And chapter 2 is when I got on treatment to where I am now. So let's start with chapter 1, 1994. When I got diagnosed at UC Berkeley, I was surprised because I didn't know. I did come to know that my mother is a carrier. And so I got infected during the birth because of the fluid exchange during delivery. The good news is my siblings got screened and found out they have an immunity, but I developed a chronic infection. Not going to China was a big disappointment. You can imagine, here I am, 20-year-old, young, adventurous, ready to take on the world, and hepatitis B got in the way. The instructions I got was to monitor, but there was no treatment. My liver function test was high, but I was not a candidate for the treatment that was available at the time. I think it was alpha interferon because of perinatal transmission. For the next 16 years, I monitor, so to speak. I started to do lab results regularly for a while, but eventually I stopped. Life got in the way. Career, starting a family, being busy, right? Besides, I didn't have symptoms, so it was easy to ignore. And what's the point if I just keep monitoring it, but there was nothing I can do about it? And this is something you have to understand. There's an emotional labor and mental burden in terms of living with hepatitis B. One is fear of dying prematurely. So monitoring is a reminder of that. I felt lonely and isolated. This isn't something that we talk about. Culturally, as a Chinese American, people don't want to know. We don't want people to know. And so under such circumstances, you can imagine how you might not want to know if there's nothing that can be done. So I live with hepatitis in silence. There's two takeaways from this. One is stigma harms. It perpetuates silence. Stigma is a barrier to care. But think about it. The virus doesn't discriminate. People do. There's something we can do about stigma. There's a cure for that. All of us, say something, do something. Our gathering today and using this forum is an act to combat stigma. When we talk about it, we normalize the conversation, we promote understanding, we help dispel misconception. As a storyteller, I'm in a unique position, like David and Jason, to speak up, to speak out, and speak for those who are living with hepatitis B. That is one of the reasons I'm here today. I have an invitation for those of you who are present, listen remotely. I'd like to ask you to do one thing, to take one thing from today. Share it out with your friends, your family, your network. Be allies. Together, we can make a difference. Second takeaway. Earlier, you heard me talk about just monitoring. That's actually a huge gap for people like me in that situation. Just monitoring. You can see why some people might fall off of that care continuum. This again underscores the need for effective treatment and a cure. Chapter 2. Fast forward to 2011, which is about 11 years ago. I was seeing a new primary care doctor, and she looked at my records and she said, "Wendy, when was the last time you got a liver function test?" I shrug. Well, bad news. The results came in and my viral load was really high. It was up the roof. I got referred to a hepatologist. And some good news. Apparently there are some drugs available in the market, unbeknownst to me. And so I was put on antiviral medication. So at age 38, I've been on treatment since. At this time, there are people that I'm aware of about my age who have passed from living from hepatitis. So here I am, a mother of 2 kids, 10 and 6, and I worry. I worry that I might not see them grow up. That's when I made a pivotal shift to become a health seeker. It's about making intentional and meaningful trade-offs in my career, lifestyle, and outlook. I really prioritize health and well-being first. And this has benefited me, my family, and those around me. Unfortunately, 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with cirrhosis, which is severe scarring of the liver. One thing to call out here, the current treatment options do not really eliminate the risk for liver disease progression, nor does it prevent liver cancer. This is why hepatitis can't wait. The combination of this diagnosis and having to witness a loved one pass from liver cancer, that put me in a tailspin. I experienced anxiety, experienced insomnia, feeling hopeless, lost. I was on the verge of depression. Luckily, I got help. So eventually, my response, I do what I know to do. That is to accept the things that are outside of my control, but not to give up, but I focus on the things that are within my control, that I can influence. I turn to nutrition and health and lifestyle. I double down on it. I call it Health 2.0. I studied functional medicine. I became a health coach. So more recently, I've been diagnosed that I might not have cirrhosis. So I'm okay, and I'm learning to live with this ambiguity. Here's something I want to share. What has helped me is this power of reframe. Lean into positivity and to practice gratitude. Out of misfortune, I feel very fortunate. I got diagnosed, I received treatment, and I'm leading a healthy lifestyle. I am lucky. Many people are not so lucky. Almost 1 million people each year are not so lucky. So let's add chapter 3. What's in the future? I'm hopeful of a cure, of a functional cure on the horizon. This can't come soon enough for people like me, Jason, David, and the almost 300 million people worldwide. Effective treatment is a breakthrough. Finding a cure is a game changer. You are my hero because you're improving the quality of so many. You are my hero. You're extending lives. You're extending life and you're saving lives. You are my hero because you're giving hope so that I can live fully and brightly, so that we can live out of the shadows without having to feel anxiety or fear or shame or guilt. So together, we can make hepatitis B history. That can be the chapter, the next chapter. So I want to say thank you to the Arbutus team, all of you, the Hep B Foundation, those of you who are in person here, and many of you who are watching remotely. Thank you for this opportunity for me to share my story on this platform on World Hepatitis Day. And in closing, I leave you with the words that I started. I hope sharing my story informs you of 2 things. Why we need a cure, because hepatitis B can't wait. And you are my hero to heal a world in need. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all 3 of them again for coming here to share their story. I know I've personally get to work with them regularly, but every time I hear them talk, I learn something new, and it brings up emotions again too, just from like the chance to get to know them in that small workshop setting, and then to get to see our storytellers come out and really share that message. And every time I feel like it gets more and more powerful. This is a unique setting. I haven't actually, I've been to one other event where we got to speak to people who are working on research. And just like they said, I think this is the highlight of kind of getting to get people together and learn how to share their voices, because now we're directly speaking to people who we can work together with and team up with and have that sort of shared hope that there will be a cure one day for hepatitis B. And again, I really just, every time you guys share your story, I really appreciate it, because I know that different things come up after you speak with other members of the community. Then you realize, oh, I relate to that. And I felt that exact same thing before. I've just never spoken about it or realized that. So I think that energy is we really felt that today. So thank you guys again. I do have questions kind of in terms of more about maybe what you hope to see in an ideal treatment and future treatments. But I do want to say I'll ask one, and then I'll see if there are questions in the group, and we'll kind of go from there. But yeah, thinking about where we are in the lab tour that we went on and what you guys experienced, whether it's physical, emotional, or any kind of impact or symptom for hepatitis B. What do you think are the most important issues that need to be addressed, and what do you want to see like in an ideal treatment or future cure?
I hope to see, which I know it's not really realistic because it's medication, but I would like to see less side effects, you know. But when you're dealing with viruses like this, side effects cannot be avoided, you know. But I would like to see less side effects. I would like to see more campaigns on the importance of treatment adherence, because I think a lot of people don't realize that starting and stopping their medication, they're doing more harm to their virus and their bodies, more harm than the virus is doing to them already. And so I think those are the two most important things I look for in a treatment.
I'll kind of piggyback off what Jason was saying. So I take a pill daily, and you know, as simple as that can sound, it sort of branching on something that Wendy touched on earlier. It can be a reminder of sort of all the negative things too. And for me, I think that ease of treatment is a huge thing. I think if I were able to kind of just get a treatment done and then forget about it for a few months and then go get another one, or kind of just the constant dialogue I have every day I take medication. It's kind of, you know, I've become really adept at kind of giving myself positive feedback, but sometimes on tough days it can be hard. And maybe just not having to remember daily would be something that could provide some added benefit to myself.
Well, first, before I give an answer, I think I just want to name that the answer I'm providing, right, is coming from this living in the US in an urban middle class setting, and recognizing that across the 300 million people worldwide, that there's lots of different circumstances. Okay. One of the roles I work in my work is a project manager, program manager. So I think of time, budget, you know, quality and scope. So I think in terms of the treatment, right, thinking about schedule, this idea of having a fixed time period of treatment as opposed to, oh, you're going to be on medication for life, right? A lot of things can happen in the future. So I think thinking about that finite period of time where it might go for the treatment. Budget, I am very lucky, right? Being in the position that I'm in, that having medical insurance and being able to afford. But even then, one of the big things my husband and I, you know, we think about each year with health insurance is this medication is probably like the #1 priority. Everything else kind of falls around that. So think about the affordability of it. I put scope in terms of ideal world, you know, maybe like a one-time administration, but if not, maybe coming back multiple times, being able to provide it definitely like outpatient care, or maybe, I don't know, someday, like if it's not a pill, it's a patch, it's something that you just kind of, it fits into your daily life. I think those would be things to think through. And then in terms of this quality, again, from project management term, yeah, I'm thinking rather than I think what's challenging right now with the treatment, with just the virus suppression, is that the minute you stop, things like come right back. So it's not like as if progress have been made. It feels like, you know, you dig sand, the kids on the beach, somewhere along the way, the sand just all cave back in. And you're like, oh, okay, got to do this again. So I think some kind of treatment that might be like, hey, this is going to take you out of this stage, or this is going to take you through to this point of recovery or health, like whereas right now it can feel like an all or nothing situation. So, yep.
One more thing, I forgot to mention, I knew I was forgetting something to your question. People with HIV co-infection have a very tiny window for treatment options. And so, for example, you guys, if you don't have HIV, you have a much larger treatment option than I do. All my treatment options have to include treatment for my HIV, as well as my hepatitis B, which is only 1 or 2 medications for that. And those are all TDF and the other abbreviation, I forget the name of it. And so I'm hoping that as the process goes forward in finding treatment options, that more options become available besides, Truvada-based drugs for people with co-infections.
Are there questions? Does anybody have any questions? And do we have a mic that we're bringing around? Yes.
So, have you participated? Without sharing specific details, have you had the opportunity to participate in a clinical trial? And if you have, or if you haven't, was that decision based on, or did that decision have anything to do with the conduct of the clinical trial? Was it too time consuming, or was it an inconvenience? Was it something that you didn't feel that would be beneficial to you? I'd just like to hear your thoughts on clinical trials.
I'm approaching it gingerly. Yeah, not the question, but the mic. Yeah, so for me, I have not been approached about clinical trial. And I'm very familiar with the healthcare system, right? But I suspect that the whole clinical trial process and all the things that are involved, I'm on the outside looking in. I do have, so my answer seems maybe very much tainted or coming at it like, well, what's my relationship to the medical healthcare system? So it's coming from there. So I think of bureaucracy. I think of like all the paperwork, all the, again, this is like, I can imagine, or maybe not saying I would not do it. If the right information and this is the right thing to do, I definitely would want to consider it. I think what's coming up for me, and I just want to name, is maybe because of that lack of knowledge, not knowing what the process is, there's a feeling of unknown. There's great hesitancy. And then the second thing is like the safety, right? Like, am I being a guinea pig here? So I think it's that pulling back. And then maybe something here that I'll just share as I think about not just me, but like I think of the Chinese American community. There's various degree of familiarity with the US medical system, right? So there's doubt. I think to recruit somebody into a clinical trial, I think it's really important to build that trust. And that trust might not be from some pharmaceutical company, but more of local, or partnering with local programs where these people are already going there to seek care. And there might even be named individuals and faces that like, oh, I know, right? So like for me, definitely probably working with my own hepatologist as an avenue, it's important. So yeah, so I would think like some of this, maybe this is a point to land on, is it's probably very important to put it from the human first, the patient first. What's their kind of state of mind, or what are the things that might be coming up for them? And how can we
make this a experience or an engagement that is patient-centered, right? I know for scientists and for the medical, we do need to focus on the disease and the numbers and all of that evidence-based. I get that, but I think it's really important to incorporate that human experience, because as I share in my story, right, there's certain behavior, it makes sense to me from where I stand. And if you're sitting where I'm at, you're kind of, oh, I can see why you might not do this. So it's just important to incorporate that. So.
I'm also someone that has never participated in a clinical trial, but when you hit on a lot of things that I also come to mind when I think of what would sort of open the door, so to speak, to get me out of, because I kind of had a preconceived notion of what a clinical trial might look like, kind of like the am I a guinea pig type questions are coming up in my mind even right now. And I think that what she talked about is just kind of humanizing every step of the process and sort of not giving a window for patients to kind of think their way out of possibly participating in something like this. Because while I haven't been approached, if I was, if I was given enough information that made me feel safe about the whole procedure, I would love to do something like that.
I've been in a clinical trial, as I stated earlier. It was a cohort. There was no medication included. However, I am very open to being in a clinical trial where either it's placebo or actual treatment is available. What would make me do it? What would make me not do it? I'm going to answer that question like this. The patient is starting from scratch, just like the scientists are. And so they don't know until they bring the two together what the results are going to come out. So if I don't at least try to do my part, then how will they know? And how can I complain when will something be available, or will something be out there to change my life or whatever, if I don't participate and do my part and take a risk, take a chance. The best that can come out, be a cure.
Thank you. Looking around to see if there are other questions.
Hi, sorry. Not used to microphones. So, I just, I was struck. So thank you again for sharing your stories. I think, it's very raw, what you're sharing. But I did find a few commonalities, I think, in the stories that you shared. And I was curious to hear, some of the perspectives in terms of, how can we make it better in terms of how we approach, for example, like the diagnosis. Yeah, I think, you mentioned, I think one of the things that was mentioned was, upon hearing your diagnosis that you had HPV, there seemed to be, this darkness, or, that you weren't given enough information, or or it fell upon you to seek that information, which I found, kind of disheartening, actually, that you as a patient have to kind of seek that information yourself and evaluate and take, so I'm wondering if maybe there might be some thoughts as to providing access, upon diagnosis to individuals to refer them to support groups or local support groups, I think, or the Hep B Foundation, certainly, but, so that you can interact with people who have that, share the same diagnosis as you and share your stories and have support in that way. So I'm just wondering if that would be something that you think would be beneficial. And then I have my second question was regarding, one of the things that was mentioned was that, upon diagnosis, you enter this monitoring period, right? Where you have to, again, like take it upon yourself to monitor, and you're not really sure. I think it was mentioned that, sometimes it felt like you were predestined, right? To enter a certain stage. And so I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on, what's being proposed, or what some individuals in the field are thinking is early treatment, upon diagnosis, not waiting, but just treating upon diagnosis. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
So the first point that you mentioned is very near and dear to me because I believe that that's a key link of what could have helped me personally. I kind of left that original diagnosis at 13 kind of just completely lost. And, you know, I had my parents who were super supportive and, you know, I had a good support system, but just not a support system that was equipped to handle the diagnosis that I was just given. So like you were saying, if someone like Jason or Wendy, if anyone like that was able to connect with me at that time, I think it would have completely changed the trajectory of how I viewed my illness, how I viewed everything. I think it's just, there's so much disinformation that happens with this disease that if you can catch that early too, that's when you can really make some meaningful changes in people's lives before some suffering and other things like that can happen. As far as sort of looking at treatment and sorry, I kind of like
So, sorry, just to clarify. So, you know, instead of, you know, being diagnosed and undergoing a monitoring period and then only getting treatment once, you know, your ALT levels rise or you know, or there's some indication of possible liver damage to just treat a diagnosis. And I know, you know, I think it was mentioned that, you know, the prospect of lifelong treatment could be daunting, right? So I was curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I had a bit of a specific dialogue with my hepatologist at University of Michigan, and what we would constantly talk about when I did go and visit her is sort of her thoughts on how high my viral load was at the time. It was in the hundreds of millions, and my HBeAg status just showed high replication, and I think I left a lot of those doctor's appointments where we kind of just said, you know, it's not bad enough yet, or, you know, we're just going to wait. That was pretty disheartening to me. I think if it made medical sense and the safety and efficacy was there, early treatment would have helped me for sure.
Yeah, so my diagnosis was back in 1994, and this is pre-internet. I know it's hard to imagine, but yes, so I went to the library and looked up information. There was such a thing. But yes, to answer your question, I think you know, it doesn't have to be hepatitis B, right? It could be some of us know people or ourselves are dealing with something. And when you hear a diagnosis, right? Here we are busy in life, coming along, and, you know, and then somebody stops you in the track. It's human, it's normal to like all of a sudden like, wait, what is this? You just drop a big rock here and it's creating splashes. So I think my point is, it would be great if in the healthcare that if we do get something like this big rock, doesn't have to be Hep B, but that there is some kind of a support or linkage or referral to like the Hep B Foundation, the Storyteller. There's now an online community group, hepbcommunity.org, where people can go in and share things anonymously. So I think two things there, right? One is it would be great to have this diagnosis, and then there's linkage to just recognizing that there's going to be a human mental, emotional response to this. So how can we hold that, right? That would be great. The second piece about hepatitis B that I want to emphasize is the stigma. That is an artificial construct that we layer on it, right? Like if this is one of my vision is like, oh, I would love, you know, like some of us have been exposed to COVID, and if you're happen to have COVID, you feel in the US, at least for my experience, like I feel comfortable telling people, oh, I caught COVID, I'm gonna stay home and follow these protocol. It's very open and very transparent, and we're all doing the right thing. But when I have hepatitis B and somebody hands me an alcoholic drink, I don't say, oh, I have Hep B, I'm gonna say no, and they're gonna be okay. I feel a lot of socially, like that's one thing, like, they ask me, oh, do you want this? I'm like, oh no, why not? And then that actually internally has a lot of things like unnecessary that you're holding back. So I just want to call out that layer, which means when people are diagnosed or when they're going on treatment, there's people reluctant to get treatment because of that barrier. And so having stories, having other people that look just like me and who are sharing their story and it's okay, or normalizing it, it's gonna help really at least reduce that stigma, right? And so that people can reach out. Yeah.
I think that it's, I'm going to answer the first part first. I think it's important that for me to say, like, when I found out I had HIV, it was in 1991. And I was like, what, 18 years old? And so I'll be 50 next month. And I find out I have HBV in 2015 is a big gap, Not much has changed as far as the HIV is concerned, as far as the, receiving a diagnosis. But HBV is a different thing because let's put it like this. Millions of people have died of HBV. And I'll show you where I'm going with this. Millions of people have died with HBV. Millions of people are living with HBV. Millions upon millions of people don't know their status. And millions of people don't even know what it is. So I think that in a medical profession, a medical setting, that it should be mandatory that when you receive a diagnosis of HBV, don't just say it's just a hepatitis B virus. Explain what it is, explain what it does, so that other patients don't have that dark cloud in their head, like, okay, you just told me I'm going to get liver cancer and die. And the state of my life and what I'm dealing with, all the vices, the baggage, and the luggage that I'm carrying does not help. So I think that we have to consider situations like that, as to why when we hear a diagnosis and a person says, I'm struggling to deal with it, I'm having a hard time dealing with it. Sometimes we have to look at their jacket. Sometimes we have to look at their past, what they're dealing with, because a diagnosis like that needs to be explained. It needs to be clarified. And what was the second? I forgot the second part again. Oh, for me, treatment was just, side effects is a real bore. And it really makes treatment hard, especially when you haven't dealt with acceptance, especially when you haven't dealt with the issues from within. For example, I'm a minister, a Christian minister, a church without walls. And but before I was a minister, I didn't have anything to cling on to. I didn't have a higher power. I didn't recognize a higher power. I didn't have anything that could buffer me when I go into a doctor's office and I get a bad news like that, or I get confusing information or conflicting information, instead of internalizing it, and making it extra baggage. So I found a different way. I learned a different way, but not everybody has that option, or not everybody realizes that option. that a higher power doesn't necessarily mean God. A higher power can be you could be my higher power. You know, anything outside of myself is a higher power. You know, so I think that we should encourage our patients to focus on things that outside of themselves that can help them recover, not so much from drugs, but recover in life, you know, every day, because HBV or any healthcare major diagnosis, it's just like that card that you're being dealt when you open up your front door when life shows up. You know, we just don't know how to handle it. But more than one, it's better than one. You know, meaning more than one person, it's better than just one person. You know, I've learned not to go upstairs in my head by myself. Take somebody with me. That's a dangerous place to be by alone.
Thank you, guys. I think we're about to wrap things up, but I do want to just see maybe if in like a couple words or a sentence or two, what would achieving an HBV cure mean to you, and how would that impact your life?
A HBV cure for me would mean, wow, success. You know, they've done it. Does it stop the fight? No. The fight continues. Will I continue to fight if they found a cure tomorrow? Of course I would continue to fight, because there is I believe in a positive and a negative in every situation. The negative in this situation is that I have HBV. The positive is if I had not gotten it, I would not have been able to enjoy this inner peace, I guess you could say, this joy for living, and the gratitude of sharing it with, you know, everyday people, human people, you know, not just, you know, African Americans, not just Chinese, not just Koreans, not just human people. And I, like I said before, I enjoy moments like this. You know, this is so intimate, you know, where you really get to allow people in to see who you really are. And I would, you know, before I got this virus, I was in a really messed up state of mind. And, you know, I spoke earlier about the vices and the baggage that we carry, you know. And so having a cure would be something awesome. You know, a lot of people would live, you know, and wait for the next thing to pop up, you know. But thank you. I really enjoyed myself today.
So, you know, sitting here today, there's always a dichotomy when I tell my story, because, you know, that I'm so thankful for the opportunities and sort of the pathways that have opened because of this illness in my life. But at the end of the day, it's an illness that makes people sick, and seeing a cure would just kind of just like mark a rubber stamp on something that has caused me a lot of issues in my life. But if a cure were invented tomorrow, I think it would embolden me to further my advocacy work and to just sort of make sure that all the people that deserve that cure would get it equitably, because I know in this world that just doesn't happen. And a cure would just further embolden me to continue advocacy work, which is something I love to do. So come on, cure, let's go.
Yeah, I'm going to start off and just say, I'm actually a very private person. You don't really see me on Facebook. I don't think I would have pictured myself like being here where I am right now and kind of opening up my life and say, here you go. But I felt like it was important to share that experience of like, given you have hepatitis B, here's a response, one example of a response, right? And then giving this situation, here's what we can do. And hope that's useful. But I think having a cure is really the key. And in the talk, I talk about why, right? It's going to be huge, because having a cure is what's going to get people okay to get screened. Because right now there are some people that rather not know. Because again, it's that journey. Well, what can you do about it, right? But if we know that there's a cure, Like, okay, I'll go check, right? If I need treatment, if I need to fix me up, right? And then I'll carry on with life. I mean, that's a whole different narrative. Right now, today, it's like, as I've tried to paint in my art of living with this, every stage, there's like a lot of things that are kind of going against you. Well, that's my cue. Like lights, no. But yeah, like getting screened during that monitoring phase, right? It's like, okay, just stay monitoring, but if things go up, we're gonna give you this and treat you, and you're gonna get cured. Or be on lifetime treatment. That idea of lifetime. I mean, it's just there's just too many unknowns. And so even for someone who's very diligent and compliant to say, I gotta, be on the medication, things in life will happen and it will knock you off of that, right? So, and then the piece that I'm coming back to, particular with hepatitis B, is this social stigma and the related discrimination. If somebody's already dealing with this health as a disease for their health, this whole social layer, right, is unnecessary. We got to remove it. But I think having a cure is a very big linchpin, because when people can get cured from it, right, there isn't that ostracizing and whether it's self-isolate or socially get isolated. So the cure has a lot of ramifications. And I will just end again. I am feeling honored to speak to these heroes here in the camp and the people remotely, feeling very promising and feeling very hopeful of the work that we can do collectively and individually. So thank you.
Okay, thank you guys again for inviting us. Thank you to Holly and Gavin for giving us a fascinating tour this morning, and Lisa and Shannon for organizing all of this. We are going to be around for lunch, I guess, so we will be happy to chat and answer more questions. Yes, thank you guys.
All right, thank you. And yeah, go on. It's not every day that you get called a hero. Well, at least that doesn't happen to me very often. But, sitting and listening to the three of you, I think today you are our heroes, because you truly have made us stop and think. And, I just listening to you talk about, life's challenges, makes me feel fortunate in some respects. And I'm sure you all had the same kind of emotional responses when you think about your own situations and families and loved ones. But also just from a work perspective, hearing you talk about, the need for something that's a finite duration treatment, or something that is not given every day, that could be given, every 2 months, say, or every quarter, or something that doesn't have lots of drug-drug interactions because you've got other comorbidities. Those are things that we can work on. Those are concrete targets. We call it the drug profile that we're aiming for. And, just hearing you reinforce that, I think makes our work in defining new medicines that meet, specified drug targets really so important. So thank you, everyone who's been involved today. Hepatitis B Foundation, Arbutus, and patient advocates. Just a very powerful morning. But let's hear it again for our heroes this morning. Thank you.